Hello, loves. Today I have compiled quite a few good stories. Let's get started. Story: Auntie from husband's side. Thank God she lives in a different country. Auntie from husband's side. Thank God she lives in a different country. Even from before my child was born, although her relationship with me, also with husband, was not a close one, she started pushing her presents, her gifts, her plans on us. She doesn't have a grandchild of her own. I managed to put her into her place politely, and things are not happening the way she wished. I thought she would leave us alone and husband would grow a backbone and protect our privacy. He claims he is in between and all he wants is a united family, but I don't think that means protecting rude people and making myself a doormat. So if I am reacting, I have a reason. Fortunately, we rarely talk to her now, but it seems she still hopes for something. I don't get what, but my intuition goes crazy. I mean, we have normal relationships with many people and our toddler has enough social life and I'm not worried, but everything with this woman seems to trigger me. We had a short video conversation a few days ago. The second one we had during this year up to now. Instead of using that time to check up on our kid and have a light talk, or giving information from her side, which rarely happens, she scolded us for not taking the child to her place for vacation, like our business is hers, and she almost scolded me for being around my kid during the video call. That the kid is distracted my mom and doesn't want to look as her. When in fact, at his age, you can't really demand such things. It's creche age. Is she really that creepy, or I am just paranoid? Her Facebook feed has many quotes. Analyzing them over the past few years since we had our son, all seems to be directed to me. She plays the victim. She thinks she is being used and treated badly and things are taken from her. I'm not stupid. She has plenty of issues but seems to be fixated on our personal life and decisions. Again, thank God there is a good physical distance between us. I imagine that if I don't have a position, the next thing that will happen is speaking to my kid behind my back and convincing him different things. When he was 1, we had a video call. Again, she used the time to tell us that she can't wait for us to bring our son to her place to visit, so she can convince him not to want to mommy and daddy's place again. I would never ever do that to anyone. How can you be that idiot to need that kind of validation from a small child? From someone else's child? Husband thinks she's just plain stupid or making bad jokes, with a good intention. And I don't want to talk to him anymore because he won't understand. But I tend to believe that it's not just lack of common sense, it seems to be evil and intentional. Story: How do I handle an entitled friend? I have made some posts here about my friend so some of you might know what I'm talking about. I really need advice of what to do and if I should cut off my entitled friend. I feel so stuck on what to do. I met my friend in college back in 2019. When I met her we became friends instantly. But with that I learned about her horrible childhood trauma. Her parents came to the US illegally and they are still here without status and how her uncle or asterisk ped her until she as the age of 17. As her friend my heart was so broken for her and I knew life isn't easy on her. Both her and I changed a lot since college as one does. I met my fiancé and she has a boyfriend. Her and the boyfriend are a match made in hell. The stuff she tells me makes me really not like this guy. She would tell me how they always argue, she claimed he cheated numerous of times, how he is forcing her not to take birth control and they have unsafe intimacy, when they argue he always screams at her to shut the **ck up. The guy seems like a complete loser. Even with all their issues she always looks past it or just forgives him. There are many times that I would plead for her to break up with him and it just never happened. Then she would say something like, I'm just learning from this all. She has also spent $2,500 on his birthday and Christmas gifts. She always just buys him stuff. Whenever we're out she ends up buying him expensive clothes or food. I do buy clothes for my fiancé if I find something affordable but I know he'll like. But most of this girl's paycheck goes to buying her boyfriend stuff. She is in constant financial hardships because of it. She even sends DoorDash over to his job every time it comes time for lunch. The other night we went out to dinner and she decided to rush off when the bill came to call her boyfriend. I told her to wait and asked the lawyer for 2 separate checks. She told me she will sell it to me after her call, and when she came back she so happened to lose Wi-Fi service. She told me she'll send me the money when she gets home. It's been days and I still didn't get my money. With all of the horrible stuff she has told me about her boyfriend. She asked me if he can come to my wedding. I'm only having 50 to 60 people. It's going to be very cute and intimate. Plus the times I've tried to meet him it never happens. My friend would always say she wants to double date just for her to back out when I try to make it happen. The one time I almost met him she was dropping off food for him. She insisted on parking a block away from his house and keeping me in the car. I told her it seems weird to park a block away from the house, and she decided to move the car closer. But she made me stay in the car and it was very awkward to say the least. So I don't know how I can invite someone to my wedding that I'm not allowed to meet. I also feel like she's so self-absorbed. I was going through a rough patch. My fiancé and I had to do long distance for a bit due to having to apply for a K-1 fiancé visa. It was really hard on me not being with him and I went to such a dark place. Luckily I'm doing better now and we got approved. So my fiancé comes back in late August. I tried telling my friend how hard it's been on me, but somehow the conversation always goes back to her and her life. Since I stated my fiancé is Korean. I love him so very much and everything about his culture is so beautiful. I have been to South Korea a few times and I'm going back in August. My friend knows how much I love his family and the culture. So the other night my friend was ranting of how her cousin is dating a Korean American guy and that her aunt set her cousin up to date him despite my friend. I asked her why and how that would spite her and she said my aunt knows how much I love dramas and K-pop, so she definitely used that to get my cousin to date a Korean. I told her that Koreans aren't accessories to have and really I questioned the legitimacy of this. She then went on by saying how much she loves her boyfriend and how she prefers having a black man over a Korean man. I don't know what else to do. I feel like my friend is just going down a dark hole. I tried suggesting therapy to her and she told me it's white people shit, so she wants no part in it. I feel so frustrated and upset with myself that I can't help her. But I don't know what else to do. I get so disgusted whenever she mentions the boyfriend and the relationship. Even if they are doing well, she reminds me constantly how well they are doing. I can't be happy for her because of how horrible this man is. I don't know what else to do to help her and I just feel myself growing apart from her. I feel horrible saying it, but I find her unbearable now. I miss the friend I had back in 2019 and I don't know how else to get her back. Story: my ex demanded me for child support for a kid that is not mine. My mother and sister are on their side. Some years ago, I dated a girl. The relationship was bad. She was very controlling and abusive. It ended up really bad and we broke up. I kept going on with my life, and after some years I got a decent job, enough to solve all my needs, have a comfortable life and make some savings. The thing is, a couple months after getting my job, my ex contacted me. She first asked me to talk. I believed that she may want to reconnect or something, but she showed up with a 5-year-old child, claiming he was my son and demanding for child support. I didn't believe her, but the child age matched the time since we cut contact. I got advice from a lawyer, a friend of mine, to try to solve this out of the court. I offered to take responsibility, pay all the costs and being an active part of the kid's life, only after making a DNA test. Everyone was okay with this except for my ex. She acted offended and demanded to just give her the money she deserved. She used all the excuses she could, even contacted my family to told them I was trying to avoid taking responsibility of her child. When she ran out of excuses, and the DNA test was finally made, and surprise! Not the father. She was so mad with the result, and cried about the money, saying it was unfair and she deserved it. But she didn't accomplish anything. Moving on to the last week, there was a little party on my parents' house. My brother, a friend, and I were talking, and my brother started to joke about the situation with my ex. My friend and I started to joke about it too. Some of our comments were a little dark and bad, but we were far away from the rest of the people. Literally, we were on the opposite side of the house, and nobody else could hear us, at least that was what we thought. We were laughing like crazies when my sister appeared very angry and pushed me against the wall. She spied us and heard our conversation, and she was really mad. She started to yell at us about how horrible people we were for being mocking of a poor woman. Few hours later, when the party ended, she asked me to go to the kitchen with our parents, and she started to say how awful I was for the previous situation. Apparently, my ex had been in contact with her, and she believed her version, and that was her way to have an intervention. My brother and I were like, "Are you serious?" when she started to say how I forced my ex into be a single mother and that I have the moral obligation to help her. My dad only said that we maybe were being too cruel making jokes of her, but that I wasn't responsible for that kid. My mom then surprised all of us when she said even if the kid is not yours, you are making more than enough money to support that child, you should have helped her. Since then, I had been receiving texts, my dad and my brother are on my side, saying I'm not responsible for her, but my sister is telling me how horrible I am for being ruining their lives. My mom only said it's your decision and I respect it. I'm just very disappointed that you ended up being so selfish. I'm aware that she doesn't deserve my money and am not planning to give her any, but the constant harassment of my sister trying to guilt me, it's just exhausting. Story: parents told my brother that he could take my house, and I could just live in the camper in the backyard because I'm single and he has a wife and kids. I'm a single man in my early 30s. I've got a brother who's 29, and he's already got 4 kids now. He had his first at 22, and the second followed a year later. Then the third 2 years after that. And the fourth is the most recently born a couple months ago. His wife, Mysael, and I do not get along as she always likes to try and get a rise out of me by acting superior. Then turns into an extreme self-victimizing drama queen if I retaliated against her in any way. She can cry in an instant and can put on an extremely convincing show to get sympathy from just about anyone. My parents and brother absolutely adore her, even though they know exactly how she really is and just don't care. She's very good looking, I'll give her that. But she's so awful that I could never be attracted to her. She also refuses to get any sort of job, even though she has a college degree and my mother willingly helps with the kids all day. So their finances are entirely dependent on my brother. This also means they can't afford to live anywhere but my parents' house. And privacy is a bit of an issue with all of them under one roof in a 3-bedroom house that was built in the 60s. Growing up, my younger brother was also the obvious favorite. We're 3 years apart in age, but he developed a superiority complex because I was badly punished if I retaliated against his antics in any way back then. It was obvious my parents cared for him a lot more because he got the lion's share of everything and less people called them out on it. Which did happen a fair bit by other members of family. Which is why my parents packed us all up and moved us about 150 miles away from them, so they generally would only see us on holidays since it was a 3-hour drive. My brother got physically abusive towards me on a number of occasions, flirted relentlessly with my first girlfriend to the point she broke up with me, and laughed at any misfortune I had. And my parents just told me to suck it up whenever I was upset about it. I only got equal treatment when my parents wanted to keep up appearances. I admit it was rather funny to see the looks on their faces whenever they had to treat me equal to my brother on birthdays and Christmas because other people were present. We had relatives that were very nosy and loved gossiping drama. So my parents did their best to hide what was really going on, and threatened to take all my stuff away if I didn't keep my mouth shut. If anything, it just made my parents celebrate more when I turned 18 and moved out because it meant they no longer had to provide for me. I wasn't even done with high school yet when I moved out. But couch surfing was far better than living with them. I was low contact ever since leaving home. They didn't even show up for my high school graduation. But I really didn't care. From that point on, I would usually only see my parents and brother on holidays like the rest of the family. The start 2020 pandemic was not kind to me. I lost my job and couldn't renew the lease on the condo because my roommate also lost his job and neither of us could afford the place on unemployment money. It was a rented 2-bedroom condo that I really loved. As the lease was ending, my roommate left early to move back in with relatives, and I had to sell nearly all of my stuff because I was soon going to be homeless if I didn't downsize to an extreme. I really shouldn't have rented a place that was so expensive. But I liked living the high life. Until that life wasn't kind to me. And I realized I should have been living somewhere far cheaper so I could have saved more money to fall back on. But I had a plan. I own a truck simply for the fact that I've always loved trucks, so I found a $1,000 camper in good shape and put it on my truck just so I could live out of it for a while. It was supposed to be temporary, but I ended up living out of it far longer than I ever thought. I originally was hoping to be able to live out of the camper at my parents' house, where my brother and his family still reside as well. But when I asked my parents to let me stay for a while, they told me they had a full house and didn't want me there. Plus, we hadn't exactly gotten along in the past decade. They said they'd only agree to let me park my camper there if I paid them basically what it'd cost to rent an apartment in my area. That was way too much just to park my camper. I was jobless and trying to save as much of my unemployment money as I could till I could find a new job. I may as well be living in an apartment with that rent price they were asking. My parents called my camper an eyesore and told me to take a hike since we couldn't come to an agreement. And Sil thought it was absolutely hilarious I had to live in a camper. My brother joined her in pointing at and mocking me while calling me a homeless bum. I parked my truck/camper in a store parking lot to sleep on the first night that I had nowhere else to go. I felt scared out of my mind that someone might try to break in. Suffice to say, I didn't sleep well that night. There was nowhere else I could go as any other relatives that owned houses were fairly far away, and all my friends were all apartment people. And I was pretty attached to my area as well. So I didn't want to just leave. I'd also had my mail forwarded to a friend's apartment. It was the only way I could still get my mail anymore. Finding a stable place to park was pretty difficult. I went looking around to try and find a job similar to my old one. It took months of living the nomadic camper life. In that time, I had to deal with a lot. Everything from beggars and drug addicts to people demanding I leave because my camper was an eyesore. At one point, someone who told me to move claimed to be with an HOA. I wasn't even parked on a street with houses. And when I questioned what HOA, they got incredibly belligerent and threatened me. I moved my camper anyway just to avoid the trouble. In order to have a steady supply of electricity, I learned to use a long extension cord to plug in anywhere I could to recharge my camper batteries. This meant sneaking around and plugging it into an outside outlet of a random building while parked on a street. I know that's a crummy thing to do. But I had to keep my batteries charged so my refrigerator would stay cold. I had a small solar power bank for recharging my phone. But I didn't have anything like a generator. And generators are noisy and require fuel anyway. So I did what I had to do. After months of living like that, I finally managed to get a new job. I had to move to the neighboring city to find a job that didn't involve retail. I worked retail while in college and promised myself never again. Though I was nearly ready to break that promise. I was still getting unemployment money. But I had no stable place to live while receiving it. And I didn't want to still be jobless when it ran out. Plus, I was bored out of my mind. I had little else to do but read, watch movies on a small portable DVD player, use my phone or laptop, and keep note of where I could park and what local public bathrooms I could use. I kind of envy that the Japanese have public bathhouses. We could really use stuff like that over here. When I finally landed a new job, I practically lived in the back lot of the building by the warehouse in old employee parking spaces literally no one else seemed to bother using because they were so far in the back that the area was borderline forgotten. My boss/company owner actually liked this arrangement because I was willingly available to take any shift I could get, so long as I had enough sleep. He even let me take the camper off my truck and set it up in one of the spaces so I could drive around without it. Not exactly sure if this was legal, but no one bothered us about it. The entire time I lived back there, I didn't have to deal with many trespassers. There were a few, but the security guards escorted them out. I was pretty much on call almost all the time when they needed me, and was working virtually every day of the week. My boss let me plug my camper into the building for power and water, and I paid a small amount of rent by working for free on Sundays when no one else was in the office but the janitor and security guard. Beyond that, I usually had to shower at a friend's apartment, or at my local gym as the camper didn't have a shower in it, and only a portable toilet. And I didn't want to fill it because emptying it is a nasty chore. So I used other bathrooms as often as I could. I had a key to the warehouse, and could go in to use the bathroom there at any hour. I was even on a first-name basis with the night security guard. He's since become one of my closest friends. The camper was easy to heat in the winter with a small electric heater. Summers were not fun though. The camper didn't have AC, so I had to get a used portable air conditioner just to make it bearable. I made a lot of overtime pay, and hands-on learned some new skills from other employees. Eventually, midway into this year, I landed a better position in the company as a supervisor, and started making a better salary than my old job. That's when I decided I wanted a house. The scare I'd gotten from losing my condo made me realize I needed something much more stable for the long term. I looked around for something close to my work, and just 2 miles away found a 3-bedroom manufactured home on a small property. But I managed to get it for $10,000 less than the asking price somehow. I used nearly my entire savings for a down payment and got approved for a home loan. I finally didn't have to live in a camper anymore. There was enough space for me to back my truck in behind the house to take the camper off to set it up in the backyard. So I put it there as its own little building just in case I want to use it again. When I was fully settled in the house, I was dumb enough to brag about it on my book of faces. My family saw the post, and that's where this shit really starts. After a few weeks, my parents and brother along with his family came to visit completely unannounced to have a tour of my home. I didn't even give them my address. So how they found out where I live, I still don't know. None of my friends have fessed up, and no prior family members visited me before that. So I wonder if they stalked me at work and followed me home or something. It really wouldn't surprise me. Once I opened the door, they practically all shoved their way in like rambunctious tourists. Then just started making themselves at home. They all kept poking around, and Sael had this creepy smirk that she was repeatedly flashing me. And it was only later that I figured out why. And it made me madder than a bull on steroids that just got stung by a hornet. My parents were constantly talking about how I've got so much extra space now. And it's too much for someone like me who has no wife or kids. Sure, not now. But maybe someday. And my brother kept remarking about how there was more space than our parents' house, and my house was closer to his job too. Red flags all around, I know. Eventually, my brother asked me to speak privately. Everyone else suddenly left the room and piled out onto the front porch. That's what finally made me realize they'd planned something. My brother, let's call him Dan for the sake of simplicity, said the house was too much for me alone. And I should let him move in with his family because his wife is pregnant with kid number 4. And my house is much closer to his job. He pointed out that I already have the camper, so I could just live in that outside while they live in the main house. And I'd like to point out that Dan never once spoke of offering rent. Mind you, he's got a good job. He also started talking about how there would be changes, and even curfews. And that I couldn't just walk in at any time without prior notice. If it weren't my brother, I'd think the person I was talking to had lost their mind. But Dan lost his marbles long ago thanks to our parents treating him like he was the center of the world. I tried to speak, but he kept talking over me as if I had no say in the matter. There was no way in hell I'd rent my house or parts of my house to him. Other people maybe, just so I can pay the mortgage off more easily. But certainly not him or his nasty wife. I've heard of this exact kind of situation in videos online many times. And never once did I think I'd actually live it because I thought it so ludicrous. But my parents, brother and Sael do all fit the bill for a bunch of narcissistic entitled crazies. So I picked up my phone and set it to start recording. Then just held on to it. Dan didn't even seem to care or notice that I'd done this, and just sat there with his arms waving around while talking about all the reasons of why he needed my house. Then went from saying that to acting like it was a done deal and trying to reach out his hand to shake mine. That's when I finally showed my backbone and said hell no. And I said it loud enough that Dan stumbled backward for a second. I'd rarely ever raised my voice to him on that level because I was punished by our parents whenever I did. But this was my house, not theirs. My spine can be as shiny as it wants here. I stood up and then told him that my house was not up for grabs. And acting like I'll let him move in just because they want it won't make it happen. I bought my house for me, and it's not my fault he keeps having more kids and has to keep living with our parents because he can't afford to move out. Dan got as physically close to me as he could without actually touching me and said that I didn't deserve the house, and he needed a better place for his family to live. I laughed back in his face and said that was total bullshit because I worked hard to be able to buy my house. Of course I deserved it. Dan started yelling that I have no wife or kids, and I don't need all the space. So I may as well give it to him. I said I'm not giving him anything. And he never even offered to pay me rent. If I let him move in, I'd still be covering the entire mortgage on my own house without even being able to live in my own house. Then Dan told me that he shouldn't have to pay rent because his family comes first, and our parents said I was going to do this, and that I will. I yelled as if their word was law or something. And told Dan that they did not have the right or power to give my house to him. Then right one cue my parents and Sael barged back in through the front door and surrounded me to try and force me to agree. There was a lot of fighting. But to sum it up from this point on, I heard the line, "Just do it," for Dan way more times than I can remember. In the fight, I told them all they don't have a say in my life or my house. And to get out before I called the cops. Sael screamed the loudest at me about how she was pregnant again, and I can't do this to her. I said I did nothing to her, she just assumed she could take from me like I would just allow it. I had no obligation to her or her family. Then I called her a stuck-up bitch who never had any respect for me. So I don't care what she thinks or how many kids she has. I have no sympathy for her. She won't be living in my house. Well, that made her angry enough to attack me. She got in one good hit on my face and tried to do more, but my brother held her back, kicking and screaming. She kept demanding he let her go so she could scratch my eyes out. The phone I was holding recorded pretty much everything. So I held it up and said I was going to call police if they didn't leave right away. My parents told Dan they were leaving. Then my mother said that I had a week to come to my senses. I told her I won't be, and to not come back. Then I told Sael that my phone recorded everything, and if she tries anything, I'll press charges for assault. She screamed at me and then stormed out loudly, crying with her face in her hands. My mother was the last one out the door and said that I better do this for Dan and Sael. I responded by telling her I won't be. Story: what is wrong with me? Since I was an adolescent, I had this thing that I think/thought is a gift from God. I can look to people and read their emotional state, intention, and stuff like that. Or so, I think. When I had a girlfriend, from time to time, I would get suspicious and start to think that my girlfriend is cheating, lying, hiding things from her past. This would hurt me big time. I would obviously find one or two things that can be understood as evidence and proof of my claims or suspicions. Most interestingly, I can't really tell why the past of my girlfriends and wife are so important to me when I also believe that God can heal your spirit and that your past does not condone you if you ask for forgiveness full-heartedly. I hurt so many people to the point of either breaking them, or maybe I just didn't know them as I thought. Anyway, I destroyed several relationships because of this. When I grew older, I met a very special person, but the suspicions remained. I would accuse her of being unfaithful constantly. I'd be certain that she was lying to me. Sometimes, she was lying. Sometimes, she wasn't. I also hurt her a lot because of this. Maybe the fact that I was right sometimes is just because we're humans, so we make mistakes. If you think somebody did something bad, but you don't know exactly what, you're probably right. People do bad stuff all the time. Since I was a kid, I would see people snorting a white powder, and I would question myself what that was. It took me some time to realize that it wasn't salt. When I was a kid, I tried to snort salt, and it was not very pleasant. Sometime after I was married, I decided to experiment cocaine. I went to my cousin, who was a recovered crackhead. He told me he had stopped snorting cocaine. I really didn't think about how bad of an idea it was to both fulfill my curiosity about the drug while asking for an ex-drug addict to use drugs with me. I do not feel so bad today because I found it that he did not stop snorting at all. To this day, he is still doing drugs. Either way, I tried it, thought I didn't feel a thing, but I actually felt. I started mixing cocaine and alcohol, increasing the frequency of use. Stopped drinking and kept the cocaine for good. Time goes by, and I had a period of my life where I abused so much of cocaine that whenever I would hit a line, I would get instant psychosis. Where I live, what we call cocaine is actually just a mix where there's some cocaine in it. No wonder if I would try to smoke the best powder of the state in a cigarette, I would also get high from smoking it. I had a bad friend who would put things on my drug in order to steal my money or to do something that I am unaware of until today. Once, I am pretty sure this friend gave me a cup of water full of mowed mushrooms because I had some visual recording of small pieces floating at the bottom of the cup. Please don't judge, I was high on things I don't even remember. Too intoxicated to think before doing. After I stopped, I started having the most profound psychosis I ever had. I was certain that my wife was raped by this friend. She was sleeping with my kids. It was around 4 to 6 a.m. I ran to her bedroom and woke her up, saying that she was raped by this friend. A lot of things happened that day. I stayed around weeks with this psychosis. I could not let this go. Until this day, it is still hard to remember this without thinking that I am about to have a psychotic break. After this period, I started binging cocaine more often. I mixed it with mushrooms additionally 2 or 3 times. I used to take some Ritalin as well while binging cocaine for days without sleep. When I'd include Ritalin in the mix, I would get the most intense psychosis I ever had in my entire life. It was hell. The things I believe would hurt me so bad I would wish it was a dream the entire time. I have been clean for more than a year now, except for marijuana, which I am reducing with time. Even though today I am no longer using, almost every day, my mind talks to myself distantly, and I immediately start to feel the doom of these same thoughts. I think that my wife is cheating me with my dad, cousins, and brothers because I lived with my mom, dad, and children for months when I stopped. They helped me a lot to get my life together. I started to imagine that my mom and dad were hiding this from me because they fear I would use it again if I found out. It is important to point out that I do not hear voices or anything of the sort. I most likely listen my own voice. To the point of being afraid of thinking, because certain things that I tell myself, it simply sticks to my head so badly, then I need to do something about it to feel okay again, like, revisit a specific subject of my suspicions once again. Several times before I stopped, I went back using because of these thoughts, and even though the drug would worsen these beliefs, the drug would make it not hurt. It'd make me feel okay with these thoughts. It is simply destroying my life now. It is affecting my work like never before. I stay hours thinking about this every day. I talk to my wife several times about this, she answers me, she convinces and comforts me, but sometimes it feels like I need this again, like we never talked about this, or it feels like we never sort this out, even though we did, several times. I remember this was the same that would happen with my ex-girlfriends. I'd need to revisit the subject many times, like I knew there was something that I was not being told. I noticed it's getting so much worse, and I am so worried. Before I used drugs, I didn't have any diagnosis, but I was never normal. I had mood swings, ADHD, and now I can look back and be certain of this. When I stopped, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and ADHD. I started with valproate, then lithium, because it was not effective. Less than 2 weeks ago, I started 50 milligrams of quetiapine every night because lithium, even on 300 milligrams IR or 450 milligrams ER, was making me so intoxicated that I was dysfunctional, cognitively impaired. I couldn't even finish a sentence without having my thoughts interrupted by something I could not explain. I wonder what your opinion is. How come a bipolar person is having this kind of mental breakdown? Why? How do I stop this? It's like I am a prisoner of my own mind. It is so painful to see everything around you decay because you are not able to live. I thought so many times about taking my own life, just to be free of the pain. I have so much, and I should be grateful. These thoughts should not be important to me, but they are destroying my life little by little. Story, entitled Mother Scolds Me for Pushing Her Daughter Away. This story happened to me when I was about 10 years old. My family and I were at an amusement park, which we always visit for a day every year. We had a lot of fun with all the different attractions. The park also had smaller attractions for children that used park coins. I was always a very patient person and always avoided conflicts because I am also very sensitive. As a child, politeness and respect were always the most important thing to me, whether child or adult. I always got on better with older people than children my age. In any case, there was a pirate attraction with 2 ships where several children could shoot cannons loaded with foam balls at each other. It was in a closed room and the parents could watch from outside through a grate. These cannons, however, required special coins to work. I had always been a pirate fan and was keen to try it out. We were never a rich family, and so I was taught how important saving is. These coins only cost €1 or so, but I didn't want to waste money. So I only got 3 coins and went into this attraction. I put a coin in the cannon and started playing with other children. Me alone against 4 other children. They bombarded me with the other cannons and I defended myself as best I could, which wasn't really a problem. But one of the children was a little girl aged 6 to 8 who made it fun to manipulate me and pushed me and the cannon away so that I couldn't aim and couldn't really play. I asked several times not to push me, but the girl just didn't listen to me. Since she knew that the cannon had a timer, I felt harassed because I was alone against 4 children. The timer was almost at the end and it was also my second coin. The girl continued to pull and push me, after several requests. I didn't want to use any more coins and wanted to take advantage of the time, so I grabbed the girl by the arm and looked her straight in the face and told her to stop. She burst into tears and ran out of the room. I was able to use the time again and play again. After a few minutes, a woman shouted at me. At first I didn't notice her because I was too deep in my defense. When I realized that she was shouting at me, I politely asked what the problem was. The woman replied, "You hit and insulted my daughter." I was taken aback and said calmly that I didn't hit her and tried to explain my point of view to her. She didn't let me get a word in edgewise and shouted at me while the girl on her leg grinned maliciously. She said I should apologize immediately and leave her daughter alone and let her do what she wanted. She apparently thought I was a violent child. During the discussion a sound was heard which signaled that the timer of the cannon had run out. Emotionally charged and feeling attacked from all sides, I left the room and in disappointment how people cannot respect each other. I then found my family and told them what had happened to me because I was already crying because I was being insulted for something I didn't do. Afterwards I went to another attraction with my sister to distract myself for a moment. My father, a person with little patience, saw the mother and confronted her. I didn't notice and came back and saw my father and the daughter's mother having a heated argument. My mother didn't want to attract attention and asked my father to be quieter. The mother saw me as a liar and a bully and insulted me. A little later the father came and we explained the situation. He was a very reasonable gentleman and apparently knew immediately who the liar was and scolded his wife and daughter. He apologized and took mother and daughter to the exit of the amusement park. My mother was pretty embarrassed about this incident because we got so much attention and was angry with my father for reacting like that. I apologized for the situation getting out of hand. We tried to enjoy the day and I tried to lighten the mood, but it was in vain. Everyone in the family was pissed off for the day and we left the park to go home. I thought it was a shame that we lost our mood and fun just because of an argument. But the next year we went back and had a great time. I tried not to mention this story again until a few years later. But I will not forget this experience. Story: Is this wrong? Hello, 19-year-old, and love my parents. They have done a lot for me and paid for a lot of my stuff including college tuition, so I would rather be on their good side. However, we have very differing political views, both of them being right-wing and I'm center-left. My dad would always complain about the left villainizing the right when he does the exact same thing to the left. I usually point out the hypocrisy in that civilly, but he just tries to insult me by saying you're a dumb 19-year-old that doesn't know any better. I'm a 55-year-old man and I know this *T more, and it honestly pisses me off a bit, but I try to brush it off. It's honestly gotten really bad lately though, especially after the attempted assassination at Trump's rally. My mom and dad fully believes it was the Central Intelligence Agency attempting to assassinate him and I pointed out why that idea seemed ridiculous. The Central Intelligence Agency would absolutely ensure he was dead anyways. There would be probably more than one shooter in that case, yada yada yada. But my dad would pull the same stuff and say, I don't want to listen to you. I kept trying to get through his head in a calm manner, but he threatened he wouldn't pay for my tuition if I kept going in. I had to shut up at that point. This is far from the first time they tried threatening me related to financial means whenever politics are brought into the mix, so I'm just trying to shut up about it, but I get so uncomfortable constantly blabbering about it and I have to sit there in silence. This is sort of unrelated, but a year back I was sort of in hot water with my parents for a bit. I won't go into detail, but I will say I was in the complete wrong in the situation, so I take fault and I understand why they were upset at that moment. We had arguments about it, but at one point they did tell me they never had any respect for me in the first place, because I'm their child, and that they would continue to see me that way until I was completely independent and making good money, according to them. In another argument I tried to communicate on why something they did was upsetting. For context, they made a comment on how trashy my friend was and I got mad over those obscene comments because she struggled most of her life and I was trying to help her, and that I would like them to be more understanding. Instead they both completely brushed me off and said that since I'm their child and they're my parents they can say and make me do whatever whether I like it or not, and it feels so gross. When I try to object to this they threatened with the same stuff about not paying tuition. In that moment I feel like I'm just more of a piece of property to them rather than an actual person with thoughts and opinions. I never saw my parents the same way after those conversations and honestly made me lose respect in my parents too. This is far from the last time both parents have threatened not to pay tuition to me as a way for me to back down, and I'm realizing just recently how screwed up that is and what to really do about it. I don't want to exaggerate and say this is abuse because there are kids out there who are far worse off with their parents than I currently am, but I still feel like this is still kind of manipulative. I know I'm really fortunate my parents are even paying my tuition at all, but at the same time I feel like this is leverage for them to make me completely compliant to them. I don't want to cut them out because they're covering my stuff and I want to desperately believe they are good people, but this feels so manipulative and I don't know if I should let that behavior continue. I'm just wondering what I should do in this situation, or if this is just normal and I just have to get used to it. I've slowly been growing distant from them because I really can't stand being around them more than ever. Story: I can't forgive my dad. My sister and I went to the cinemas with our friend and we bought snacks to share. I bought candy and chocolate biscuits. When we got home, she hogged the chips she bought and also took the chocolate biscuits that I bought. I was so tired that I just went to sleep and told her not to finish the biscuits. The next day, I grabbed the chocolate from her and put it on my bed because it was mine. She snatched it back from me while I was gone, so I came and took it back. She chased me out and made a whole fuss, screaming and everything. My dad came and asked who the chocolate was for, and I said it was mine and that I bought it. She kept going, so my dad grabbed me, and I was yelling. He held me down and told her to grab it. I fought out and was about to give her some when she said something to upset me. I was like, "F you, I ain't giving you any." Then she hit me, and we started fighting. I got extremely mad because my dad was holding me while she was hitting me. I was getting hit by both her and him. Then she went to get a knife, and I ran and jumped on her. My dad separated us and was so mad. He grabbed me and I was sitting on the couch when he just started hitting me so hard, punching and kicking me, yelling and going absolutely mental. He wasn't himself. He usually hits, but never this bad. He was acting like I was a grown man his size. He left the house and came back, then ran at me trying to hit me again. I begged him to leave, and he just smashed up my chocolate. I was in so much pain and went outside, having a panic attack. I called my mom and told her everything. She said I should have given the chocolate and that he was obviously wrong. She told me to go to her room and lock myself in. A couple of hours passed and he came back, buying me new chocolate as an apology, but I chucked it. He also sent me $20, but I sent it back. A week went by, and I ignored him. He was mad at me and tried to make me feel guilty. Today, he apologized because my mom forced him to, and he is giving me $150. I told him I forgave him, and he said sorry, hugged me and all. But I just can't feel myself forgiving him. The way he hit me, like I wasn't his daughter. It was like he was fighting me. My jaw hurts so bad I have to chew slowly, and the way he kicked me while I was crying and begging him to stop, he kept hitting me with so much force. It wasn't even my fault. He didn't hit my sister, he was being so nice to her. He gave her money but was shit-talking me out loud the whole week, putting all my siblings against me. He would cuss me out and say a whole bunch of rude things when I walked past, literally bullying me. I feel bad because I know he feels guilty, and I'm taking his money, but I just feel so angry. The fact that my family jokes about it as if it wasn't so traumatizing. I thought he was going to kill me because he has crazy anger issues and can't control himself. He takes meds for it and even said himself that he couldn't control himself. But it fills me with rage how he could do that to me and then be like, "If you act up, that's going to happen to you next," to my siblings. I know he is my father and has done everything for me and sacrificed a lot for me and my siblings, but I just can't forgive him. By the way, I turned 16 and am a girl, and my sister is 17 turning 18, and my dad is big and super strong and taller than me, and he is fat and strong. Story: I don't want to accept my father anymore. Recently I have a fallout with my dad that led to me staying by my grandparents. In short, he became drunk and started to confront me when I said that I don't want to listen to his music. He listened it so loud that I could hear it clearly in my room, which is 2 rooms further away from where he is listening, and yes, my door is closed. In general, it is also thanks to his music that I don't like Vietnamese and refuse to learn it. Both of my parents are Vietnamese. In the past, he has his damn bass near the wall to our neighbor. Therefore, whenever he started to listen to his music, our neighbor started to banging on our door. Sadly, I am the only one that could hear it as my sister is too nearby the music and my mother doesn't hear that well, so I am mostly the one who opened it and received our angry neighbor. My mother and my sister don't like the music as well. I don't particularly blame my neighbor as I understand that he is rightfully frustrated over it, but the situation didn't improve when my father adamantly refused to confront him. I mostly had to pull him over, and it ended that he just screamed at our neighbor and slammed the door, and then it repeated until we could tell him to stop hearing his music. This occurred in the past many times. I am also the one who has to confront our neighbor most of the time, until my father accepted that we moved his places somewhere else, but that was more than enough to make me hate Vietnamese music to the point that my mood hit rock bottom when I hear it. I tried to let him listen to it a bit, but it only soured my mood more, and he never held on his promise to shut it after his proclaimed last song. One of the following will occur when he said that he will only listen to his last song. He will continue to listen and ignores his promise. He will restart the video in the hopes that we are too stupid to recognize it. He says he can't stop it as YouTube continue with autoplay. I know that it isn't nice to forbid him of doing STH. But if he can't learn to control himself, I have to do it. In his life he only cared for himself and never questioned if his family is happy or not, and that only leads to me, my sister and my mother suffering under it. For example, we were on vacation in Vietnam and we were on an inflatable that was currently towed by a motorboat at high speed. As it was connected wrongly on the boat, the inflatable will tilt by every turn the boat makes. As we fall into the sea, we all have life vest on. It shouldn't have been a problem. There were also some wooden island near us. I fall on my chest and had trouble breathing as I float. My father was in panic as he wasn't a good swimmer and then pressed me down to rescue himself. I actually don't know what I should say to that. We both had life vest on, and how could you press your own son down to rescue yourself? This is one of the more severe story, but there are many others. He isn't better with his family like with my grandmother, his mother. There was a time where she was addicted to her sleep medication and she wanted to go to the ER even though she had nothing. It is way better now. My relatives didn't want to risk it and brought her there. Okay, to be more accurate, I brought her there as most of my relatives didn't live near her or are busy with anything else. They mostly called me and asked me if I could bring her there, and I am fine with it as I have time, and if it is an emergency I am more than willing to help. But one time when I was at home, my father joked about the fact that I will probably bring my grandmother to the ER while he doesn't have to do anything and doesn't need to care. Small reminder, this is still his mother. He also said that while I was in the same room. I started to question my kindness to other after this, but decided to stick to it at the end. When he is retired, he also expect me to take care of him, like paying him. Yeah, he can completely forget that the only thing I will pay is the money he has given me while raising me. Afterward, I will break contact with him. I know that probably most of the people here say that I don't have to pay him, but I see it in another way. As I don't accept him as my father, I see it in a way that I borrowed his money and just pays him back. After I got a job, I am currently studying engineering, to end our relationship. I will probably stay in contact with my relative, father sides, as I have a good relation with them, but I will not fold when they ask me to reconsider my decision about my father. My mother will probably also break contact with him as she only stays with him because of us, me and my sister, and when the time comes I will help her. My mother is probably the one who formed me as who I am today, and I am really thankful for her support and her teachings. Story: I need advice, please help if you can. So, to premise, I, 25 trans dude, and my BF, 25 trans dude, last week we were going to visit his parents out on his stepfamily's land. They're the country but not from the south type of people, and my BF grew up in, as he said, the middle of nowhere. Thing is, my BF is very much what I'd like to call a punk cowboy. Very anarchist, very for the people, heart of gold, just a wonderful and lovely guy. He's told me how bad his parents can be when it comes to being racially ignorant, but I'd met them before, so I figured I could handle it since they'd never really been that bad. This time was different. My BF's parents came up from Florida, where they live, to visit. We decided to see them since my BF's pet rat had recently passed and we wanted to bury him up where my BF grew up. We were gonna camp out on his stepfamily's land before burying his rat. We didn't even make it to the tent. For some extra context on his stepdad, let's call him Bob, fake name. Bob peaked in high school and is a self-reported nice guy. He would be friends with girls to get them to date them, and then when they didn't, he verbatim go, "But I was such a nice guy." Do you see the problem here? Hi BF here, how does Bob not know? With Bob being like this, he's checked a lot of other bigotry boxes and he loves to talk down people he sees as weaker or lesser than him. He speaks as though he's one step ahead of you, puts words in your mouth, and will constantly strawman or character assassinate just to prove a non-existent point. His ego is much larger than his actual intellect, and it shows with how he pulled me into an argument about trans people in front of his trans stepson. Now, I'm black. I'm also ODHD, so I talk with my hands a lot, I gesture a ton. We'll come back to that later, it's relevant. Constantly, during the conversation, he kept interrupting me, assuming what I was about to say, making assumptions about my points or intentions, and constantly tried to talk over me to the point where I got frustrated with how many negative traits he was projecting onto me. He'd say things like, "Oh, so you think I'm stupid," after I'd tell him the reason why I was explaining my speech patterns is I've had people misunderstand my lack of tone for attitude. Again, autism. Like, "Sir, where in that sentence did I say you were stupid?" The entire time, when he saw that I was getting frustrated, he was smirking like he was winning some kind of game. The conversation continued and Bob finally pulled a microaggression as old as time. He got angry that I was shooting down some of his points and said that I was being aggressive just because I talk with my hands. I'm not going to go over microaggressions here, but if you don't know, do a Google search and specifically research the angry black woman trope. I clocked that and just said, without a beat, "That's racist," and boy howdy did they, stepdad and mom, clutch their pearls. They immediately denied it, even though they've been racist before, not in front of my face, have asked me weirdly personal questions, and after this current incident, managed to say even more racist BF here again. At one point my mom literally asked what is his ancestry. They truly have been treating me like 3 on 5 of a person, yet they've never heard of a compromise before. His stepdad told me to get out and I took a walk. I later found out that he was talking to both of us, especially since my BF had agreed with me out loud and had mentioned that he's thought that they've said and done racist things previously. It's been almost a week since then, and we had decided to bury Draco, the rat, near our apartment instead. Since the blow-up, his stepdad blocked my BF, behind his mom's back. She didn't know at first, and when he went to talk to his mom today, his stepdad ignored the fuck out of him. We just continue to laugh about this because he refuses to communicate like an adult. He plays high school girl games because he peaked in high school and has done nothing but abuse the stepchildren he can get away with abusing, and the thing he's done in the past to my BF and his brother always makes me broil with anger. Currently, my BF. He's healing and learning have a bit of self-worth for himself. His parents, especially stepdad, have always been terrible, but he's finally at a place where they hold no power over him anymore and he can set boundaries. I'm proud of him. Story: I, a transm 17, feel like my mom doesn't want me to get better. I, transm 17, feel like my mom doesn't want me to get better. I had a therapist and other forms of help for some months. I gotten comfortable with my therapist enough to open up about everything that has ever happened to me, including my dad's and mom's abuse towards me, them letting friends and family hurt me, our old housing situations, and overall anything that has or was happening. I was able to be told that yes, it's likely I have autism, that they'd give me ADHD meds just in case. I was also told I'm schizo and I have tics randomly, and yeah, I'm depressed to a severe level. I developed an eating disorder and I also have bad anxiety issues that helped calm a lot of me that I was afraid of. But my mom hated my therapist. That's because when my mom's ex Betty was living with us, she just recently ran away from my mom with her baby. My money would give me the baby while she went out with friends. Betty tried her best to make my mom stop, but she couldn't. Each argument ended with my mom laying hands on her and me getting in between them to help Betty. I told my therapist about this and she saw me babysitting. She was concerned because I was a high-risk person, so she was obligated to call DCF. My mom hated her, but I convinced her to not change me. She was the first person to believe me from the beginning and try to help me. Now a week or so ago, I'm bad with time, sorry, my therapist had to call DCF again. This time it was about my eating. When her now ex-GF moved, my mom was put in charge of all the shopping and everything else. My therapist told me that I didn't have to be a parent to my siblings. I wasn't their parent, I didn't have to clean after them, so I stopped doing that. My mom hated that because she used to rely on me for everything and I just gave that up for my own mental health. So I'm retaliation. She would take my siblings to the store without me. They'd go grocery shopping and never buy my safe foods. Safe foods are something I'm 100% going to eat. I have a habit of going days without eating, so we developed that plan. I might be fat, but I can't eat like I'm fat, lol. Then once I did want to eat, she's yell at me for eating their food. The fridge had either dinner stuff or snacks. If I touched a snack, I'd get yelled at. They never bought stuff for me to eat, and I felt like I was taking their food. So I stopped eating again. It went on for a month and some change, and then I told my therapist. I told her in tears how I haven't had an actual full meal in a couple of days. She saw that in my face. I was pale and tired, and she said my cheekbones were caving in. She said that she was sorry, but she had to call CPS again. I broke down because I knew if my mom knew, she'd be mad at me and never let me get more help. I was right, OFC. She took my therapist away, then my therapy manager. She made each therapy manager session all about her. I wasn't allowed to get a new therapist till SHE felt comfortable with them. She took my meds away and said, "You don't need them, you need weed, it'll help everything." I don't understand why my shit always revolves around her. Like, am I crazy, or should my therapist and any other help I get be at my comfort, not hers? Why is it when I'm getting better and able to function normally, she fucks it up? Like she's acting as if I am selfish for wanting a therapist who actively helped me, who sat there and calmed me down and made plans with me. She hasn't even attended family therapy. BC, she's busy. Am I wrong for thinking she doesn't want me better or something? Story, you will decorate your apartment how I want it to be. My mother is a bit narcissistic. At first, she seemed completely normal. Until you know or live with her. That's why she can't seem to keep in touch with any of her friends or even her children. I haven't been in contact since 2023. After getting fed up with her self-righteousness and narcissism, I moved away when I was 19 to 20 years old, which was unusual because rent in the area had skyrocketed. I managed to get by with a roommate who had a high-paying job and also had his own job. She doesn't pay any of my living expenses. We do everything ourselves. Despite this, she has always tried to control every aspect of my life, and the fact that she continues to do so is why I choose to go no contact. I only realized it was an option through psychotherapy and a supportive group of friends several years later. Before that point, I listened to her and she could make me feel guilty about many things I didn't want to. When I moved, I tried to decorate my new apartment any way I saw fit. I have so many ideas. I immediately hung all the posters I had in my room in the hallway. The walls have a few cracks and I want to cover them up. We used red and blue pushpins. We still don't have a kitchen table, but we never eat at the table anyway. I wanted something really small so it wouldn't take up space, or something multifunctional. We finally found a pool table that had a sturdy cover on top so we could put a vinyl cloth over it to protect the table from getting dirty. My dad really liked that idea. My mother, not really. She hated the way I decorated my new apartment. She thought it looked childish with fairy lights on the ceiling. My dad thought it looked like a bachelor apartment and had no problem with that. Must love my dad. She kept commenting on how I needed to take down the posters and buy paintings I didn't like or need. She kept telling me I needed to draw something, which I did, and frame it to hang in the hallway. Every time I visit or come home to get more stuff. It's the same conversation every time about how ugly she thinks my apartment is. She would never do it that way. She needs to come in and fix it. No adult would want it that way. She wants me to redecorate my entire apartment, which will cost hundreds of dollars hiring a painter or buying things I don't need from Goodwill. I tried to gently tell her that I liked the look of my apartment and that I was an adult who could make my own choices. We haven't moved all my stuff into the apartment yet. It's horrible how she makes so many mean comments about how I have no taste. I need to tear everything down and start again. Her house looks so much better. Most of the time I ignored it. I was so used to her hating everything about what I did. Then she stopped making those comments and started taking me to garage sales in hopes of finding something I needed. Of course, it was a plot of her own. She found a kitchen table and chairs that she loved. I don't want them. I'm looking for a billiard table. She bought them all, and when Dad said she wouldn't throw away his kitchen table, she gave them to me. I was raised to always accept the gifts she gave me, otherwise she would get mad. She would make it her mission to make me feel guilty and the worst person in the world if I showed any dislike for her gifts. There were times when she returned some of my Christmas gifts because I didn't have the right reaction to them. If I hadn't flashed a big smile and enthusiastically thanked her for what she gave, the gift would have disappeared from my pile and I would never have seen it again. There were times when she told my siblings to steal it from me and that I would never have the chance to wear that shirt and play with the toys. Just because I didn't show gratitude forever or show enough gratitude for her to have any self-respect. She thought she had the right to control my reaction when she gave me a gift. Other times, she thinks she's entitled to other people's gifts and steals gifts from me, my dad, or my siblings because she thinks she looks better wearing them or just plain simply want them. I was never allowed to own a game console because she believed I would spend less time with her. In fact, I've found other ways to spend time with her that aren't technology-based. She just didn't want to give me something I could use to ignore her. I ended up saving every bit of my birthday money to buy myself a laptop when I was 16 years old. There was no help from my mother because she often told people at my birthday party not to give money. See story, entitled Father Says I'm Playing Victim Because I Don't Want to Live in the State as Him at All Times. This is a recent and more short story. I 18, female, and my father 44-45-ish, male, do not have a great relationship. I grew up in a very abusive household. I am currently working on leaving, but my dad knows I am very distant with him. Typically we do not get along, but today he was being nicer than usual, so we were talking casually. Somehow retiring in beaches got brought up. My father happens to be obsessed with the ocean and beaches. He has told me he would love to retire on one, so I ask him, don't you plan to retire on a beach? If I can, but I don't know how possible that is. I do intend to move, but if I do I'll take you with me, of course. Where do you plan to go? I don't know, somewhere hot. I'd love to be somewhere cold. Now saying I like the cold was a mistake. He immediately starts ranting about how he hates the cold, how surely I don't, how I would change my mind if I lived on a beach, how while places like Puerto Rico is hot, Hawaii is a nice temperature, just warm enough, and has beaches everywhere. It's just too expensive. I just calmly say I don't like the heat or beaches, I prefer the cold. This was my second mistake. Eventually we get to the car, and the topic get changed until he eventually asks me, do you plan to stay here or move? Of me, no, I'd like to move somewhere else that's cold. Why? Me, I don't like it here. Why? So I started naming a bunch of different reasons. Eventually I make my third and final mistake and lightly mention part of the reason I want to move is because everything here reminds me of my brother. My brother is a heavy drug user who's in and out of jail, and when he lived with me and my father he used to heavily psychically harm me, and if I said anything I was punished for snitching. He starts going on a full-on rant about how I'm playing victim, how if everyone felt sorry for themselves like I did then no one would have a job, I go to work more than he does, and that I just want everyone to feel bad for me. How where I live isn't a bad place, it's rapid with drug abuse and crime, it's just shit and conservative leaning, so he likes it for those reasons. He started going on and on about how I'm lazy, and I want everyone to feel sorry for me, and how I didn't even really experience the worst of my brother, and how I just want to be special, and how he has real trauma from my brother unlike me. For context, I have had many different medical professionals confirm I have PTSD. Ever since he learned this, he has been trying to one-up my trauma, even lies about being diagnosed with PTSD so he can pretend he has the authority on what PTSD is. He was never diagnosed. He refuses to even see a mental health professional and thinks they are all a government conspiracy. I wouldn't be shocked if he has it, but my issue is with the fact he lies to feel better than me. I'm sure he said stuff about how ugly my body is and how I'm a shallow person who just wants everyone to pity me and buy me thing too, but sadly this is just the average day near my dad. Hope someone finds my story funny. Story, I feel defeated and stuck. I want my parents to move out. My parents have been irresponsible my whole life. I've been homeless and in many uncomfortable housing situations, including living with extended family, homeless shelters, cars, or squatted housing on and off throughout my childhood. During my senior year of high school, I lived in a motel. I turned 18 in late 2021 during the pandemic while my parents and two of my siblings lived in the motel. I was in my first semester of college and had to return to the motel due to financial struggle. During that time, my dad had told us that the weekly rent owed to the motel was paid through a rental assistance program. However, they would spend their money on gambling, weed, and alcohol and never buy food, causing us to lose a lot of weight. Two of us were in college, and they would take the relief money we received and spend it too. Then they would criticize us for not having jobs, even though my mom didn't have a job either and one of my siblings had to quit theirs because my parents would take their money while they were sleeping, and it got to a point where they couldn't afford transportation to the job. On top of that, I had no birth certificate or social security card because they lost it when I was like 5 and never replaced it, so I couldn't get a job until I got them. It took months, but my siblings and I figured out how to receive my documents and got jobs to save up to move away from our parents because their irresponsible ways were keeping us trapped in the motel with them. It was really hard to save and keep money from our parents. At first, my dad would tell me how he made more money than me and that my money from my near minimum wage job meant nothing, letting me know constantly that on a bad week, he made twice as much as me. Then he and my mom would ask for money. They would get mad when we asked them why or said no. It was hard with them taking our money, but after 5 months of working, we had enough money to start looking for a place. We decided not to rush since we also wanted money to save for a car. We told our parents we were looking for a place, and they said that they would also look for themselves. While still touring houses, we were given an eviction notice, and it turned out my dad had been lying about paying rent. We had no clue because he did say the program was over and would ask us for money to cover it. My siblings and I decided to just move into any place we could. We got accepted for a 3-bedroom house for a good price in today's economy, and we had our move-in day set just before the eviction date. Just before we moved in, my dad asked if he and my mom could move in with us for just a year and said that he would even pay half of the rent, and we could split the other half 3 ways. We didn't think he'd actually do that, but we agreed because we felt bad and didn't want them to be homeless, and we figured we could use their car some more. I ended up getting a new car the same week we moved, and then my parents' car needed some work. So we ended up splitting the rent 4 ways, me, 2 siblings, and Dad. Then he crashed his car and never got it fixed because he had no insurance. After that, it continued to get worse. My mom would take my car, lie about where she's going, and not bring it back in time for us to go to work. My dad yells at me for asking for the money in weekly increments but never has it all at the end or beginning of the month. They refuse to put money in the grocery pile but always eat the groceries. They will take things from my room without asking. They never put gas in my car after using it. They argue constantly. I was taking classes at a local community college but had to stop because I had to work more hours to cover for all the things that they do and don't pay for. This is just a small list of all the things they do that affect me. My siblings and I want to stay in this house because the rent is so affordable, and its location is extremely convenient for its distance from shopping, recreation, and my job. I can work 25 hours a week and go to school while living comfortably. How do I get them to move out? Or do I just accept that my siblings and I will have to move and leave them homeless? Bye and see you again in the next videos and stories.